Hello and welcome to this UPE Python tutorial. In this video, we will be learning about file objects and how to interact with them. We will specifically look at how to read, write, and append to external data files using Python, and the topics which are covered in this lesson will be important as you progress in your programming or development career, because you will likely need to interact or create external data files. For the purposes of this tutorial, I have created a text file named script.txt and filled it with the contents of the B-movie script which I found online. As a disclaimer, I do not own any of the rights to the movie or its script. The purpose of the script is for demonstration and educational purposes only. You will see that I've chosen to use such a large data file in order to have our viewers interact and gain experience with larger data files in this Python files context. Alright, so in Python, in order to open a file object, we will first need to declare a variable and set it equal to our open class, which takes in at least two parameters. So in order to do that, we will name a variable named file and set that equal to open, and we will open our script.txt file, and for right now, we will set it to read mode. So the first parameter indicates the name that we are working with, and it is important that the file is located in the same directory as your Python file. If you are familiar with navigating your terminal, then you know that you can add such levels such as / and .. so on and so forth, and tailor the navigation to point to the file in a different directory. If you're unfamiliar with terminal navigation, then I suggest keeping your file in the same directory as your Python file for now. The second parameter which our class takes is the mode which our file will be opened with. So right now we have it in read mode, but we also have the write mode indicated by a lowercase w, the append mode indicated by a lowercase a, and we can also do a read and write mode by indicating r+. So another very important note in working with files in this manner is that we must explicitly close the file when we are done using it. So what we do is call the close method on the file variable. So we will do file.close, just like that. And the reason that you need to do this is because not closing your files once you are done using them will leave your system vulnerable to memory leaks. Over time, memory leaks will reduce the performance of your computer by reducing the amount of available memory, and in the worst case scenario, this will cause your system to thrash. This will also cause your system to throw application errors and exceptions. So now we will go over some methods that you can use on your file object. The first one is going to be the name method, which is one which returns the name of the file which you are using for your file object. So in order to do that, what we're going to do is call on our file variable name, which is file, and then do .name. And if we wanted to print that onto the console, what we do is embed that in a print statement. So if we save and run that, what you'll see is that we get the name of our file printed on the right. If we also wanted to see the mode that our file object is currently in, what we could do is call file.mode. And if we save and run that, you'll see that on the right, it tells us that we are in R+ mode, which means that we can both read and write to our file object. Alright, so now if we wanted to iterate over all the files in our file object, what we can do is write a for loop, which goes through each line in the file object and prints each line out on the shell on the right. So in order to do that, we're just going to delete this line here. We're going to define a for loop. We'll say for line in file, and what we'll do is print it. So we'll just do print line, and we will do end equals empty string. So if we save and run that, you'll see that it goes through and prints each line onto the shell on the right. And the reason that we end our print statement with an empty string is so that we do not double print the new line character. This is because the file itself has a new line character at the end of each line, and the print statement itself would usually print another new line character if we did not explicitly change that. So we will now move on and explore the context manager for interacting with our file systems. And what a context manager is it will automatically close the file for us once we are done calling to it, and it will also close out the file in the case of any errors or exceptions. This makes it easier in our case as we do not have to have the idea of explicitly closing the file object hanging over our heads when we are using these file objects. So in order to use the context manager, we're just going to make some quick modifications to this code. So we'll take out the close statement and this iterator here. And what we're going to do is just make a slight modification to our open statement. We're going to call with open and then have these parameters be the same. And in order to declare that as a variable, what you're going to do is call as and write the name of the variable you want to save it as. So in our case, we'll use file again. And for right now, what I'll do is just do pass. So this is how you would set up a context manager in Python. So with a context manager, once you're done using the file object and you leave this block that the context manager kind of creates, then our file will automatically get closed. So that takes away that burden of having to call explicitly that close method. Once you leave this block, the file is automatically closed. So now using the context manager, we're going to explore some other ways to read in the contents of your file. So one thing we can do is call the read method. So what we would do is set a variable, and we'll name ours contents, and we'll just save it to file.read. Now if we wanted to print the contents of that file, what you're going to see, now that I save and run that, you'll see that it gets squeezed on the shell, and that's because it's a really big data file. If this was a smaller file and had less lines, the shell would take the time to actually show you each line in the file. But this is one method as to reading the entire contents of your file all in one shot. There's also another method called the readlines method. And what this method does is it returns a list of each line in our script. So what I'll do is change this to read lines. And because, like I said, it's going to return such a large list, I'll just index a portion of it just so that you can actually see it on the shell. So I'll just index the first 20 lines, and I'll save and run that for you. And you'll see we get a list of our first 20 lines that are sliced out of the full list here. Now, if we just wanted to return a single line in our file object, we can instead call just the read line method, and this will just return a single line at a time. So if I save and run that, you'll see that we get a single line. An important note here is that the read line method picks up off of where the last one was last located at. So there's going to be a cursor that moves along our file, and this will get moved with the read line method as well. So if we copy and paste this a couple times, and one thing that we'll do, since we're printing one line individually, is add the end equals empty string. We'll just add that to each of our lines here. Now you see in this example that each time readline gets called, it picks up where the last one left off at. So now what we're going to do is go back to our original read method. So let me just change this back to that. So with our read method, what you can do is you can pass in an integer's parameter. So in our case, what I'll do is do 60. And what this will do is just read in the first 60 characters of the file. So if I save and run that, you'll see that these are the first 60 characters that the cursor comes across. Now, if I use this method in this particular manner, where I'm just reading in chunks of characters, it's going to act similarly to the readline method, where it's going to pick up where the last one was left off at. So it'll pick up where the cursor is last left off at. So if I were to call this multiple times, it would actually go and take different chunks of the file and progress along it. So I'll just do it twice, just for show. So I'll just save and run that. So in the case that we wanted to know where our cursor last left off at, what we can do is call the tell method. So I'll just do a print statement, and we'll just say cursor is at, we'll concatenate this as a string. So we'll do file.tell. So I'll save and run that. And now you'll see, because the formatting still has end equals empty string, it's kind of just here. So you see the cursor left off at position 63, and then it picks up at this position and continues on with the file. Now that we have covered the basics of reading a file object, we will now move on to writing file objects. And I realize now that the entire time I had it in both read and write mode, so we're just going to pretend that the entire time it was just in read mode. So if we wanted to write to our file, what we would do is call file.write. It would pass in something to write, so I'll just say hello. And if we save and run that, you're going to see that it errors out immediately because we still have it in our read mode. And in order to actually write to our file, we would need to have it in write mode, indicated by a lowercase w. One thing to note though is with write mode, it'll overwrite whatever file we currently have. So one thing that we're going to do is name this script copy. And even if script copy does not exist, it'll create it for us and then write in the contents. In the case that this file does exist, then as mentioned before, it'll overwrite that entire file. So now I'm going to execute this so that you can see the file that it writes. So by executing that, now in my File Explorer, I'll now see a script copy.txt, and I'll open that for you guys, and you'll see that it wrote hello. In write mode, the cursor still acts in the same manner that it does in read mode. An example that we can do to showcase the manipulation of the cursor is going to be the following. So I'm going to change up my file, and the first thing I'm going to write is test. Now what I'm going to do is tell the cursor to seek position 0. So I'll do file.seek, and I'll tell it to go to position 0. So now the cursor is going to go to position 0 instead of continuing off from where it last left off at. And now I'll say file.write, and I'll say write a capital B. So first it's going to write the word test, and then it's going to write a capital B. And let me just fix that for you here. And if I save and run that, now if I open our script copy.txt, you'll see that it wrote best. Since we know now that when we write to files, it has the tendency to overwrite the entire file, we can instead use the append mode to simply add to the end of our file by changing the mode here to A. In this case, since we know that our file now says best inside it, what we're going to do is have it say best tutorial ever. So what we're going to do is add a space, and we'll do tutorial ever. Close the string and close the write statement. Now if we save and run that, and now what I'm going to do is open up the string copy.txt, and you'll see that we successfully wrote best tutorial ever by appending the tutorial ever part. So now to finish off this tutorial, we will end by replicating the entirety of the B-movie script into our script copy.txt file. And this is going to be done by nesting our context managers within each other. So let me start by closing this off, and we'll start by doing with open. And what we're going to do is open our script.txt file. And we're going to save that into a read mode, and we're going to name that read file. We're then going to open the file that we're going to write to. So we're going to do with open, and we're going to write that to script copy.txt. We actually want to give that the write mode option. We're going to save that as write file. Now, if we wanted to go through each line and then add it to our script copy file, what we're going to do is do for line in read file. We're going to do write file, not write, and we're going to write that line. So now if I save and run that, you'll see we have no execution errors. And now if I pull up the script copy.txt, we have the entirety of our script in there. And I'll also pull up the script.txt file just for a side-by-side comparison. So you'll see they look exactly the same. They have the same length, and they end in the exact same manner. So thank you everyone for watching this tutorial, and I hope that you had gained some knowledgeable insights as to using file objects in Python. If you have any more questions or comments, please direct them to upe.uconn.edu. Thanks for watching.